si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia? Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Bene, buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this event of the meeting, on the 45th edition of the meeting. The title is, if we're not after the essence, then what are we after? We've been asking ourselves as well, after I'll present our guests, on this aspect of the essence and on the aspect of care. We've found this word compassion. It came up in our discussions. And today, having heard the Pope's message, even he spoke of compassion. But we will try and understand what does this term compassion mean? This term that has so much to do with presence in the world. So, the essence. I think you can define it as a almost nostalgic searching. That every time that you lose the essence, we struggle more and more in our search, in our journey as humans. We need stable and consistent reference points to follow, and when we lose them, then we lose the essence. I present my guests now. Fabrizio Starace, the president of the Department of Mental Health and Pathologies in Modena, but also my old boss, because we work together as the National College of Directors, of Medical Directors, and among with all these other titles, he's also my friend. Then Michele Zanetti, former president of the province of Trieste, and also a person who helped Franco Basaglia to close the Trieste asylum, and then helped in the promulgation of the 180 law. And today he will tell us about this relationship he had with Basaglia. Gigi de Palo is the General Director of the Angelini Foundation, and he's also a great friend who will help us, particularly to value this word, compassion. First of all, we've received a video from Devora Kestel, who's a person I know because she worked in Trieste. And now she's the director of the WHO Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse in Geneva. And she has sent us this greeting. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, my dear colleagues. I'm Deborah Kester. I'm the director of the Department of Mental Health, Brain Health and Substance Abuse at the WHO, the World Health Organization. It's a real privilege for me to be here with you today to honor Franco Basaglia, a man who changed the course of mental health history. My personal experience in the field has allowed me to see at first hand the impact of his revolutionary ideas in the world and the transformation he generated in so many realities. Curiously enough, towards the end of the 1980s, I attended a conference presenting my experience of working in a psychiatric hospital. Interestingly, the paper I presented began with a quotation from Basaglia. It came from a related institution and tells a story of a man who, after swallowing a snake, had lost his freedom. One day the snake left, and the man, free once again, didn't know what to do with his freedom. This metaphor perfectly describes the plight of thousands of people with mental health problems, men and women alike, trapped by institutional violence. Franco Basaglia did not just denounce this violence, but actively worked to end it. His fight for the closure of mental asylums and the promotion of community-based mental health approaches opened a new era, not only in Italy, but throughout the world. Yet, we are still far from achieving his ultimate goal today, more than 30 years after his death. We still continue to see violations of human rights in most diverse contexts: homes, schools, workplaces, and unfortunately, still in mental health services. These realities are a powerful reminder of the need for continued radical change. The WHO continues to emphasize the importance of shifting mental health care, and it needs to be moved from psychiatric hospitals to community-based services. As we well know, this doesn't mean simply closing mental asylums, but creating a network that allows people to live full and experienced lives. We must invest in mental health, not only through clinical services, but also by promoting active community involvement. Our World Mental Health Report emphasizes 3 key bridges and identifies these bridges as lines to follow. First of all, it's essential to recognize and value the importance of mental health, treating it as a fundamental component of our overall health and well-being. We must consider mental health as an essential human right and a key contributor to public health, social well-being, and sustainable development. Our health and mental health specifically is a crucial need. Secondly, we need to transform our environments, the environments that influence mental health, by on one hand reducing risks and on the other hand enhancing protective factors, so that everyone can have an equal opportunity to thrive and achieve the highest possible mental well-being. Finally, mental health care services need to be enhanced, ensuring that all mental health needs are met. Doing this through a community network of accessible, affordable, and high-quality services. The work of Franco and Franca Basaglia is not finished. Their legacy still guides us, urging us to continue their fight for a more just and inclusive society. We must build on their theories and practices and unite to ensure that everyone can enjoy adequate support and ethical treatment. Thank you for listening and for being here. Together, we can truly make a difference. Have a great rest of the meeting. Thank you to Devora Kestel. And now let's get into the main part of our meeting here. We'll start with Fabrizio, and our theme is mental health and Franco Basaglia. So I'd like to ask Fabrizio, at what point are our mental health services at? We've heard just now that there's a certain type of work that needs to be done that's not only clinical, but it's also of reevaluating the contexts and of individualized projects and programs. What point are we at? Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. And this year, like no other, where we are celebrating the centenary of the birth of Basaglia, it's an opportunity to trace what the work that's been attributed to him, and also to judge the fruits of the law that in 78 authorized the closing of all mental asylums. Then, as Bobbio reminded us, perhaps it's the only true reform that our country has ever had in this sector, because it's a reform that, beyond the technical context of giving people citizen rights back to people who had been totally stripped of them, it's been about 45 years since that fundamental series of events. We can trace an image of the situation as it is now and as it's developed over the past few years. We have a network of services that responds to three key words: community, proximity, and help at home. I mention these things because 40 years ago, these words would have sounded strange. Perhaps some of you will have immediately detected in Italian, the assonance between these things that leads the reform as lined out by the ministerial decree number 77, the one adopted in connection to the necessary reforms needed as part of the National Resilience Plan. Community homes, having hospitals close by, needing to increase help at home. These are three pillars on which the modern Italian community mental health system has been established. As Devora Kestel reminded us, it's a unique experience. Italy is the only country in which hospital institutions, the great mental asylums, were closed. In all other European countries, even if they follow a similar community mental health policy, they still have large institutions that concentrate many hundreds, if not thousands, of people with mental health problems who suffer psychological problems. So these elements were not applied without contradictions over the course of time. The first key point regarding that of funding, that of resources, which is not only economic resources, and I'll talk later more about those, about the human and professional capital later, about cultural resources, but focusing on economics for now, the situation has had, in the first sort of 20 years of application, resources were available insofar as that they were resources converted from the ones already being used by mental asylums, be that the funds and the staff. They were slowly reversed given towards local regions. So the local regions gained more personnel, they gained more activities, they gained more funding to carry out these acts. And at the turning of the century, with the second mental health program, the structure of a mental health department was established alongside a series of activities that were designed to prevent the need for the worsening of these problems, and some local preventative measures. The first among the norms that's worth discussing is that established by the third or fourth Berlusconi government by Minister Tremonti, who introduced the hiring block, first for an indeterminate period, and then in 2010 it changed with the 2010 financial law, and then it was independently reviewed and renewed regardless of the political alignment of the subsequent governments, with only a brief pause in the pandemic up until today. This has changed the fundamental human capital on which activities for mental health is run, and that is the human capital. And until recently, the number of there was over 31,000 people working, and in this sector now in 2024. We're down to roughly 1,000 personnel. We've got 1,000 staff less, and as far as last year, we've 5 years ago, maybe doubled or tripled the number of inpatients we have. If you judge purely by this contradiction, you can understand quite how much the battle that mental health services departments are fighting in order to try and increase that kind of minimum of 3.5% of health spending that today is destined towards mental health. And it shows how helpful this is, how essential it is. An example to give is one of the countries in our fellow G7 countries that we compare ourselves with for many other things, for economic and foreign relations, Germany, France, the UK, they have their percentage of mental health spending is roughly 10%. That's about triple what ours is. If you consider what the Ox said, it fixed the cost of mental health problems in a society, the direct costs, that is, of helping them, and the indirect costs, that is the loss of productivity, absenteeism from work, illnesses, to 4% of GDP. If we translate this figure I've given you, this 3% of our national healthcare funding, we put it in terms of percentage of GDP, that's roughly 0.2% of GDP spending. 0.2% our investment, 4% the costs that not facing up to mental health problems cause. So we invest less than a 20th of what this all costs us. This is the first main element of contradiction that we need to tally up the costs now. And analysis of even very recent initiatives adopted with law drafts to help the mental health sector. I don't think that a proper strategy that's worthwhile has been identified. Hopefully we can talk about the perspectives, the future prospects later at the end. But I was talking about human capital earlier. Human capital, that is our professionals. These days, there's you can call a vocational crisis in working in the mental health sector. Professionals prefer working in the private sector or working independently for themselves. This is the effect of a perverse system in which we've accumulated administrative and bureaucratic problems that waste huge amounts of the very small amount of time that professionals have. It drains their time away from doing their real job of establishing a therapeutic relationship with people who suffer, and to establish these relationships when they engage in therapy, you need time. There's obviously the need of motivation, and skill is an important aspect. But if you're stuck always with time pressure, looking at the clock because you've got another 20 people in the waiting room that need to be seen. So this is another element of contradiction that we need to confront. We need to ask ourselves if the current training programs university gives professionals, if they're really capable of giving our professionals the skills they need to face the challenges they do. The capacity to work together as a group, that is, giving up at least a small part of your individual competition related to your skills. That's to learn new ways of reading, of understanding, of learning, of seeing techniques that are proposed by other professions, by teachers, by nurses, by rehabilitation specialists. This is teamwork. It's learning from other fields. I don't know quite how much of the teaching for mental health is pointed in that direction. Quite how far the education system helps people learn about the health by integration, by how we deal with people with serious mental health conditions, what they call psychosocial or pharmacological problems. It's how do we bring them back into society? How do we help them deal with a right to their own home and not to just throw them into an asylum? Their right to be able to work for their own community in which they find themselves, to become a contributor and a participant in a public spending. Your right to have satisfying relationships. What part of modern teaching that's given to our students encompasses these themes? I don't know. There's a more general contradiction as well, which is used by an English word, that is governance. I define governance as the difference between central responsibility, that is of the government, and periphery, that is the regions. What's done in order to understand that the regions use their autonomy properly and base it not on how we get equilibrium between reforms at the government and intervening on local shortcomings and local needs. Those of you who look up more of this, you'll find a synthesis document that we presented at a national conference recently in 2021, in which all these elements are analysed and explained. There's also the problem of organisation. It's a great problem. If we have to work as a team, if we have to perform group work, we can't have sector-based organisations. That is, that are too divided. I've worked in places where we've had integrated departments and integrated services for 15 years, and there are regions where mental health services don't talk to the substance abuse departments, and those two don't talk to child psychology departments. It's not only does this go against what we've learned, but it's anti-scientific. We've learned that many mental health problems we can find them far earlier than when you're 18, and only if they're identified early and followed up across the course of their childhood, and can all the bits of evidence be found, followed, explored, can we help people to recover or to get better. So we need integrated departments, and here we face very strong resistance on the behalf of many corporations. Another contradiction is the relationship between public and private. That is the for-profit hospitals, the for-profit centres. The systems that we've created over the past few years do not get to the end. They don't give proper value to the power that the private sector can have in the in the mental health sector. So what do I mean about the non-profit private sector? It needs to fight day by day against administrative elements, and it ping-pongs itself between direct assignment of patients and other problems. We use the words of personalized approaches, but yet we always go back to using ancient techniques that can be fine if you're setting up, doing things the old-fashioned way. It works somehow if you're trying to look at gauging prices, but it's impossible that if we have to cut individual things to judge 1,000 people, it's hard to create personalized programs if we don't innovate in some way. So in summary, I think this is an important occasion to do it. We need to bring attention of politicians and of politics onto mental health, because recent efforts towards the weakest, the most vulnerable in society, it's not a technical question. It's a question of political choices. I think the question of mental health today is among the last. It's among the end at the bottom of the list of priorities that politics has given itself. So I don't want to talk too much about the current aims of the current government, but over the past couple of years, recently, it's been priority zero. You only need to look now at the problems in prisons, and what's the solution that's imagined? That is of creating special prisons for prisoners with psychological problems. So we're basically just reinventing the idea of isolating of isolating people with mental health problems. There's no looking into what are the root causes of violence that generate antisocial reactions and possibilities of recovery. I think that we need to start from opportunities like this and try and get through to politicians and show them the necessity of a bigger, more intense, more active attention on mental health in order to be an Italy that's up to the greatness of the past. Thank you, Fabrizio.
We'll pick up some of those things later. Michele Zanetti, the president of the province of Trieste, when there was, as Fabrizio said, when there was this reform, the closure of an asylum in this this happened this was really a real revolution, we can define it. But this year, this is 100 years since Basaglia was born. I think it's a difficult person to comprehend a very competent, cultured person who came into Gorizia in 1961, and he went to the asylum in Gorizia, and he was horrified by what he saw there. People segregated, kept isolated, kept apart. People, those who'd lost, as Fabrizio said, every right that is entrusted to you if you're thrown into an asylum. But Zanetti is the president, the democratic Christian president of the smallest, I think, province in Italy, and he sought Basaglia. Maybe you can talk to us about this, and between them, they do this work of closing down the asylum there, and then they had the Law 180. So what strikes me is that the cultural background of Zanetti was completely different, a completely different cultural position from that of Franco Basaglia. So it's difficult to define his positions, but two people who allowed themselves to be struck by a reality that was tragic and of death, a deadly reality. Michele, so today there's a little place called Tenova Piccolo, and he's come from there to us today. Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. I was asked to speak a bit about Basaglia and his human personality, something I'm very glad to do. And I fully share what's been said by Starace a little while ago. We've got a political class, not without splitting up by parties, but that shows itself, in fact, unable and incompetent. It doesn't react, and probably they're not even prepared to learn, educated about this. Many people pick up administrative and political responsibilities without preparing themselves even a little bit for the functions that they need to cover and the things they need to administrate. So I was the employer of Franco Basaglia. I gave him his job. There was a national examination competition, and he had by far the best results there. He was employed in the normal fashion by the province, and they started a relationship which evolved a bit over time. A relationship of great trust, reciprocal trust. In the first place, we can say that he had to focus on what Basaglia wanted to tell me about more than once. He had to inform me about his struggle against the institutions in a global sense, for the deinstitutionalization, it's a difficult word to pronounce, a struggle which had an experience initially in Gorizia, and I reassure you that I really don't know the Trieste mental hospital before becoming president of the province, and when I visited it, I really had a shock from the horror of the situations there, and the complexity of pains that was there. It seemed a population of more than 1,000 ill people, and so the institution, the global institution, was an institution that should be abolished, that had to be abolished, this totalizing institution, because it takes the freedom away from people, while all the efforts, all the work of Basaglia and his team, and even of those of us who cooperated with him to move ahead with this project, was that to free people, to liberate them, and to give back to them not only their liberty, but also the dignity and their rights, which they had lost with being hospitalized, that dehumanized them, that made them into objects and no longer persons. On the institutions, I'll open a little parenthesis here. Maybe some of you know this, that Basaglia, through his cultural references, he drew them. There was one in particular, which was that of the French philosopher Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre. To recall one, in his best man at his weddings, Pessian, gave him, for a wedding present, he gave him the complete works of Jean-Paul Sartre. With Basaglia, we met Sartre himself because I wanted to engage this man, as a quite particular strange person, in the conferences on minorities that we organized in the 70s in Trieste, national and ethnic minorities. Sartre had a previous history of defense of the Basques and many other minority components in France, minority groups in France. Sartre, he couldn't come to the conference, and he said, I would only come on one condition, that you show me that we need to destroy the principal institution of the state, which is that which oppresses the national minorities. And we said, sorry, this much I can't do. I can't guarantee you this, sorry. I myself preside over a little institution, but still a real one. And there are institutions and institutions. There are those that need correcting, those to be suppressed, but also institutions to give value to, including those democratic ones. And so that struggle, that fight to control the total institutions, against those total institutions, against prisons, and also this civil hospital needed to be deeply changed, and so even schools and also barracks, military institutions, all these things. It was somewhat the complexity, the overall reflection, the constant reflection, the updating that he drew, that went from practice and reflections on one thing to a next step moving on. But above this, after this, I was asked through Basaglia that there was a strong friendship grew up between me and Basaglia, in trust and loyalty in his behavior, which his official behavior in work. I could trust him in his governance, his administration, even in the administration of the psychiatric hospital. And he went beyond that. It went beyond that. He was a man, I could say, he was an extraordinary man, gifted with a charisma, a personality that's so particular, so unique. He's very Venetian. He spoke Venetian dialect a bit, also French somewhat, and English too. And we said to him that deep down he makes himself understood by speaking Venetian wherever he goes. And he was a man that if you met him, he had physical tics, but a sort of very happy man, a cultured man. easy to sit at table with him and discuss things. Cultural, even pretty deep cultural discussions with him. He was part of the group of consultants for the Einaudi publications with his wife and with many others, many other academics of different disciplines. He was a man, nevertheless, of a capacity to have relationships from that he placed both at these levels of sort of high involving discussions and elevated ones, all right to sort of low-level relationships with those with whom he started the relationship with the suffering peoples, from people with mental health issues, with whom he could immediately build up a relationship, a constructive one, of dialogue, of value, of sharing, and proceeding even in the details of the lives of these people, with simplicity and with immediateness. Even though Basaglia, at a certain point, he didn't take care and interest anymore the patients himself. He dedicating himself to the more organizational problems, and above all to the relationships at a national and international level that he spread, as we heard in the doctor in the lady we just heard from the World Health Organization. I repeat, he dedicated himself above all to this organizational level. But as soon as he arrived, since he was surrounded by mistrust or doubts, both by hospital medical doctors, psychiatrists, and by the Trieste medical body overall, and so bit by bit, the city comprehended the importance and the strength of this project that was brought ahead, that was realized almost in record time, because it was just in a few years that we got to the close down of the psychiatric hospital of Trieste. And so to overcome these doubts, this mistrust, even from the nursing people within the hospital, he arriving, he said, tell me what is the worst case the most grave case you have on your hands. So that the most serious case was a person who had many problems, many psychiatric troubles, and who was tied down to the bed, physically constrained, in the ways that they used to do, but not before my time. But these things were. They even used electric shocks before my time, but the surgical lobotomies that were even practiced. This person was he was tied, he was bound up, but despite being tied up with his fingers, he managed to dig into the mattress with his fingers and pull out the springs from the mattress, and he swallowed them. And then it required surgery and so on. And so Basaglia, this activated his efforts towards this guy, this person. And after not long, he became given the responsibility of the internal bar of the hospital. He didn't give any sign of particular sufferings or manias which could be feared. And so the friendship that linked Basaglia and was also in some ways linked our families too. After a couple of years, it was often that Franco would come in the evening to my place, to my home, maybe after dinner, and we'd have a nice glass of whiskey together, and even there, as the recollection I have that my family budget was that of my wife wasn't super high, so if it maybe with Franco, with his wife, there was a bottle of whiskey that went down in an evening between us, and so we were a bit worried about this. I recall that we from that point on we acquired whiskey doses that measure us to give ourselves just small drinks of whiskey, because otherwise our budget in our family wouldn't have coped with the expense. So there was many opportunities to know each other, to become friends, even with our families, these interpersonal relationships. And from all of this, I'm really grateful for all of this. I'm grateful for the memory of Franco Basaglia. I learnt from him, above all, in his tenaciousness, the way that he went forward and followed up his project, his plan, his objective. And I believe that this man, of whom we celebrated this year his centenary, and the Italian Post even made a stamp, a commemorative stamp for him, with his face on it. This man should be remembered in this simplicity of his approach and in the depth of his thought. A thought he never wanted to make an ideology out of his ideas. He was very careful, very keen on practice, not on theories or theorizing. But nevertheless, he wrote down his theories. His books are still worth reading today. But one thing we can recall about him, that I believe that in all the period of the last century, we had great theories, great thinkers and theorists, but among these, we could put Basaglia among them. But unlike all of the others, apart from just expressing a thought, a deep thought, and the creative thought, he was able also to realize in concrete fashion that which he had in mind. And this is something that nobody else I can think of the theoreticians, of the philosophers, managed to do. I thank you. Gigi, can you help us reflect on? We'll reflect with him on this word. We shared up the task. We're going to reflect on this word compassion. So, the word compassion, its meaning is that, what does it say to us? People working in health, but also to us in general. What does it mean to be compassionate without this sort of pious version of it? So, let's see what comes out. That came from a great pasticcerie where we had a lovely time together. Okay, thank you for the invitation. When this was proposed to me to take part in this, I want mental health issues in some way. Do you want me to share my mental distress in what we're talking about? Or, so what were the rules of engagement? But because you see that I'm not an so coming out of one's own field is difficult. I'm not a mental health expert. So being asked to intervene on something different is striking. So given the facts, and I put the alarm on myself. All the families inevitably have within themselves problematic situations within families. Maybe it's the grandfather, maybe it's the children. And it's right around the table we're speaking about issues today with panic attacks and these sorts of things. All these things are common amongst all of us, and it's something that we have to deal with, even if many times we don't realize it. I want to reflect a bit about this, because this is about the theme of compassion. Because recently I was at a dear friend of mine who's dying, and there's no point in beating around the bush. He's dying. He's in a hospice, lovely one, super organized, lovely, really efficient, the sort of classical hospice where people would rush to end their days there. It's really like being in a family. And while I was there, in front of, in a really nice room with a TV, but it's very efficient, in front of his body, which was really in going against the hospice in the sense that it was all consumed. It was the opposite of the style of the hospice, because it was all crooked, bent up with suffering. I realized that the compassion is not a sentiment, a goodwill sentiment, a sweet thing, a sort of cute, soppy thing, as my old parish priest would say. But it's a punch in the stomach. Compassion, even in Scripture, might say this, speaks of it in this way. A bite. It's violent. Compassion is violent. It's something that hurts you, something that makes you wake up, something that doesn't leave you indifferent. I defined compassion as a healthy pain of the soul, of the spirit. And this isn't something indifferent. It's not a vague sentiment or a goody two-shoes thing. It's something that messes you up inside. That the fact that inevitably, while you're there looking at this situation, it breaks into and disturbs a bit who you are and what you're living. And I perceive it in this way, the sensation, a sad sensation of not being able to rejoice about something, not be able to share joy about this thing. So my wife and I, get into bed. What do? You get in, you lie down. Maybe you think about the day. You do a bit of a balance, a sum up of what the kids, what I've done, what I've got to do tomorrow, and you're vaguely happy because a complicated day is over. And so it's a bit this alarm, this disquiet that leaves you happy, but how can you be happy deep down when the friend is dying in the hospital? How can you be deep down happy while there's this friend of yours who has his mum who doesn't recognize it anymore because she's suffering from senile dementia? How does it finish when the school friend of your friend is being diagnosed with something terrible? Or how can you, thinking of thousands of kilometers away, and not even that far away, there are the kids who hear the air raid alarms. This disquiet is something that, in a way, I defined compassion. But compassion is not something that, as Manzoni had said, that courage is something you give yourself. Compassion is a gift. That is, I who feel compassion, not because I'm good, I have a great heart, not because I'm Catholic, I'm Christian, or whatever, I go to Mass, whatever. I feel compassion because when a dry branch, when I had my crises, when at 20 years old I didn't know where to lay my head, I'd bash my head against, and I had many problems, not just mental, but also physical or complex things. There was somebody in that situation, there was somebody who embraced me, who welcomed me, who looked at me differently to how I looked at the rest of the world. And this gaze, this look at me, was in my case something that melted in me and brought out a compassionate gaze on the rest of the world. St. Francis wasn't nice, wasn't good. He didn't kiss the lepers because he thought one day, oh, let's start kissing lepers one day. He started to kiss lepers because when he was a leper, as far as everybody was concerned, when he was abandoned by everybody, when one after another, when he was alone, when he was doing the worst things, somebody, in this case God, embraced him. And so his embracing the lepers wasn't born from an act of will, but from a choice, not from a duty, but from something which he'd received. And so this is a bit what happens in any situation and any occasion. My wife, when we speak of family, she always gives an example that is true for everything, for your faith, for family, for compassion. The compassion is a perfume. We don't think to be compassionate. If we're compassionate, so people will give us the ingredients. If at a meeting, they'll give us the spray thingy to put up the instruction book. They'll give all the instructions, and I'll become compassionate. No, it's not like this. If I'm compassionate, it's because I feel this. I sense this perfume. So the right amount of yeast, the right amount of salt, the right amount of flour, the right amount of water, the right amount of whatever, and you do this, and then you sniff. You can smell the smell of the bread, and if I put in here a lovely steaming loaf of bread, you'd smell the perfume of the bread, the scent of the bread, and that would be a direct, concrete experience of something that is good to eat in front of you. It's a bit like when the greatest joy when they say to you, what did you put in this thing that you've made? And when they ask you, they want following the indications you give them, because they've smelt a lovely smell, and it was so nice that they have a desire to replicate it, this bread, to make. It's not a list of rules. It's often, we think, even in Christianity, but also in this theme, we think of it as a list of rules, categorical imperatives, something we must do. And so we can find the best doctors in the world. We can think that the world of medicine, or the pharmaceuticals area, is making big steps ahead. We can find the best hospices in the world. We can invent superstructures, the most efficient as possible, but without this gaze, this look that makes you feel loved, they wouldn't go anywhere. The sick person doesn't just want to be healed. My wife doesn't want just to be listened to. My son doesn't just want attention. We all want to be loved. We want this gaze that effectively changes our life. And I want to say that the difference, hearing it today, I took a note about this, the difference between Basaglia here, or was he left or right, or was he Catholic, or Jew, Muslim, it doesn't matter. But we ask ourselves these things. The difference wasn't between our differences, but between who has this gaze and who doesn't want to have it. Because this case, potentially we've all got it, because I've got it not because I'm good, I've got it because I've received a lot of mercy. And so this mercy that I've received, I can't pretend that I've never received it. I think, can you remember Verdone in the film in Viaggio with the Papa. Sorry, it's a film reference. If you've seen something, you've seen it, and you can't pretend you haven't. So, like Law 180 was a way through which things were changed. The eyes were changed in front of people, and this opened an attention. It put some reflectors, shine a spotlight on people who were before totally abandoned. The culture of throwaway that we speak of so often. This was the way that the people looked at, and this was changed. Today, with efficientism, if you're not a high performer, if you're not a winner, if you don't have all of the right things, then nothing goes right. We still have this culture of throwaway, of disposal. So, back when I was an adolescent, somebody went in Africa and in Tanzania, in the orphanage, where there are also people with psychiatric difficulties, and the dirt, the complexity of not having proper medics there. There was also medical disability, mental health issues. I asked myself then, what's the point of going to Africa to do this nice thing, looking after, staying with maybe a child and taking care of them a bit, listening to them, trying to play with them a little bit to distract them? What's the meaning of all this? How does it change the suffering in the world? So, can my gesture change something? Evidently no. But if we resign ourselves to the fact that this type of gesture of action don't do anything, instead we are saying to the world, by doing these things, that there's no wound that's incurable. No person is totally alone. So we won't change the structures of sin that constitute and set up these inequalities, but we seek to offer, not only to ourselves but to others, a key to reading this thing that's different. So here, getting towards my conclusion, I believe that today's meeting and these reflections we're doing need to recall a thing, that the center of everything, and even it's a great opportunity we have to dialogue with the world, the external world, with an indifferent world, a different world. The center of everything is the human person. If we don't recall this, if we don't put the human person at the center with his dignity, then we're not going anywhere. And I often say, willingly, in a dynamic of super moralizing Catholics, saying life is worthwhile in the belly of the mum, but in the womb. But when we talk about refugees, then not so sure. Or then there's the kind of socialist type Catholics, where the human dignity is only in the migrants and refugees. But when you're talking about women who are constrained to have abortions, then there are maybe the self-determination, etc. Friends, the social doctrine of the Church, but even our reason, tells us that the dignity of the human person, and the human person is worthwhile, not extrinsically. That he doesn't have dignity because of certain qualities, because he has somebody who gives him strength, because he's efficient or whatever. He has dignity intrinsically, the whole fact of being born, of being in the world, because this, and Basaglia, in a secular way, comprehended this totally. We're unique. We're irrepeatable. So what's the value of Michelangelo's Pietà? It doesn't have one because there's only one of it. Same as each one of us. If we realize this gift, that truly it's a gift, all this, and so you understand that there are no more divisions, because not only human reason says that there is a single human person, and so this is true in every environment, in every situation. I have a son with Down syndrome, Giorgio Maria. You think that my son has a life that's a second league because he can't do, unlike Marco, he can't do some things? No. Each life is unique is unrepeatable. And this is the great opportunity that you have to dialogue with everybody. It would be nice if all of the institutions, not just hospitals, if they were impregnated with this being moved, this desire to live, seeing in the other a richness, a real wealth. What is the problem? It's that often, willingly, we let the days go past when we forget things because it's complex, it's difficult. I'm not negating the difficulty and complexity of all this, but it's necessary. It's necessary not to impose ourselves on ourselves to this. It's necessary to go and recall, to go and remember the mercy that we've received. There's a dear friend whom I used to go to when I had problems. Whatever problem I had, I went to him. He was a very wise person. He called Giorgio. My son is called Giorgio, in fact, in honor of this man. I went to him and I said, "Well, I have this problem. What do I have to do?" He always said the same things. Age quod agis. With my wife, he'd give the same response. Age quod agis, what does it mean? It's dead easy. Do well that you are doing. And so if you're a doctor, how do I be a good doctor? How do I do it well? So if you've got a person who's got to do a chemotherapy, you transform it into a fighter who can overcome, who can do this battle, or a resigned person. If you're a teacher, depending on how you explain the infinity of Leopardi, a youngster could be one who, like me as an adolescent, who didn't care anything about anything, or it could be from the way you've explained it, he could go and start writing his own poems. So following how you're being a parent, whether you're just sitting on the settee on Instagram, or whether you play in that moment, you use that moment as a father of your family. This is something that we can all do. We need to help each other remember this. Thank you. Starting again, Fabrizio. You've given us a description that's quite a bit difficult of mental health. It's a bit troublesome. But from where do we start? How do we start again? Where can we start again? I think there are 2 or 3 deep questions that structural elements and contingent things that come to mind, come to hand. Doing well what we do. I like this advice that Gigi's friend gave him in all those situations, difficult ones. Today we don't do well that which we know how to do because there's few of us. In another context, I used an example. It's as if we found ourselves as an infected person who you had to cure 10 people and you had 1 box of antibiotics. What can we do? Shall we give 1 pill to each person, knowing they won't do anything? Shall we choose 1 person, one of those 10 patients to whom we'll give them the proper cure, and the rest will send them home? So we workers in the public sector, in public services, find ourselves in this situation. And so we need to intervene in a decisive way. When I say decisive, I mean without attitudes, those that in politics we could call vocational ones. Somebody has to do this. This has to be done. And it's you. You must do something. Permit me to give a suggestion. If really this area is considered a priority area to invest, because the mental well-being and psychiatric well-being of persons is a potent mover of relationships, but also of economic growth, of staying well in society. If this is a priority area, that you identify it as a priority objective of the health system. And in this way, you dedicate to this priority objective the right amount of money that we can, what we can allow ourselves, that we need to grow in the future. This was necessary to resolve another problem, that of the lack of personnel. Now people escape from the public services because if there are 3 people doing a job instead of 10, those 3 people, they need to pick up the burden of all the 10 people that are supposed to be doing that work. So they need to do this in 3 of them. They need to do the job that 10 do. And so first chance, they're going to find an alternative. If instead we reconstitute that strength, that human capital, professional human capital that's necessary, then we could go in the right direction. I think that there's another question deep down that we don't speak much about, apart from in little interventions, that of the diffused mental health issues that are spread around in the population. We talk about and deal with the most severe cases, but we need to be aware of that the current medical services aren't able to give it a response to those 15% of the population. These are the official estimates that has within a year some amount of mental health issue. So we need to invent new techniques. Emilia-Romagna, to deal with the lack of self-sufficiency, has picked out a particular area of the balance with which they can contribute in a way that's much better than the state method. And these are some are just a few of the proposals. Many of those proposals we speak about we speak to these with the citizens, with all of you, with families, with associations, with those who look at communications. We're going to speak with all of these people in the 10th of October on the World Day of Mental Health. In all of the Italian departments, the doors will be open to create some forums, so agora, where professionals will compare it, We'll talk about their limits, their possibilities, and together we'll try to find some responses to give to those who have the role and the responsibility to face them. We'll wait for you on that day. Michele, you spoke about trust, about having trust in this man, but speaking Venetian, you played cards, you saw him in the evening. No, he wasn't a big card player, but I can say many things, many anecdotes, but he had a capacity to involve people. I think that he managed to get involved from the Italy, convincing it to do a little flight of 50 little people who went from Trieste to Venice and back again, and they were super happy to have gone on this little flight because they felt like they were the greatest people. And other things, there was the time when, maybe somebody knows this, he invited, and was there maybe a month and a half, a group of artists, of teachers who lived in the asylum with the sick people, and they had their workshops there. This part of the hospital became their workshops, and Marco Cavallo was one of the best known there, who built in there and worked, and this was then taken out of the hospital. They couldn't get out this work of art because it was so big, so they had to demolish a little bit of a door frame to get it out. And this thing went around the city, giving the signal of the liberation of the sick people. And this involvement of people he let other people get involved as well. There was a family relationship. Franco Basaglia, he saw my kids playing with Barbies, and he got involved. He started playing with the Barbies as well. He wasn't so interested in the dolls as such, which I didn't like them very much. But the girls in those days really liked the Barbies. He did his university thesis about Barbie. He was so struck by seeing the kids playing with them, about playing with Barbie. He allowed himself to be taken by everything. He had a capacity of communication that was amazing. So sometimes he used it to provoke. So there was some affirmation claimed by him that he never did, but he let this polemic go on because he needed to talk about this stuff. So he let the polemic go ahead. He managed to use the media, the TV, and the radio. I recall, for example, those who have white hair who are present, maybe they'll remember that on the Rai radio they gave some transmissions for a week. They gave them that they let a particular personality run the thing for a week, and they gave one to Father Balducci. And Father Balducci, who was running this whole week, he invited Basaglia and spoke to him about his projects. And this was a very, very well-followed transmission, broadcast. And so he used even these little spaces he could find to continue to spread his ideas, his projects, his objectives. And I have to say that this is not one of the least of his capacities. The relationships that he had with many scientists, both Italians and foreigners, who in their turn, they trusted him, they helped him, they supported him in his work, in his daily work. Thank you. Gigi, a last question to you. You've accompanied us in this reflection, but I understood that we need an education to this attention to reality, to have this right gaze on reality. And this education, where does it come from? So I tried to say it in a very clear way. Maybe I'm not an expert. I'm a person, like I said at the beginning, who's matured this gaze of compassion because I, in my turn, when I was a dry branch, I was looked at in a particular way. I say it because, from one side, this frees me from being first in the glass, and also this discourse is something that has to do with with everybody, if you like, because it's not just here. There's somebody who can say, no. I've already had this case since the beginning. I had it, and I didn't need any help from anybody. I've never had any moments of fragility, of failure, of weakness, of difficulty. I've always managed all by myself. I want to be clear about this. I think that the education is an enormous theme, a great theme. Families clearly are called to educate. I am convinced that this idea of education, in general, I think there's a book about that your colleague wrote about this. I don't remember the name. Sorry about this, because this thought isn't mine. But so I'm convinced that in this phase, but also in absolutely, we need to stop playing in defense, and we need to seek mainly to play in offense, to move forward, to play in attack, because it's unthinkable, it's impossible with the greatest history in the world, which we have, to recount, always to sort of gossiping about the difficulties or about the adversaries. This is a great, stupendous story that we can recount, and I think we should say yes. I think in us we recognise, we know our children. They are the same. The names and the roles changes, but the kids are still the same. It's the yeses that are different. For example, from the point of view of the use of smartphones or social networks, our approach is switch this thing off. This is the most of the education that the parent can have. Instead, the parent today needs to do a qualitative leap in this to grow, to understand this more, so that the generation following him can be more formed about this. So we need the ways to read these things, to in a way to use them in an intelligent way. But what I want to say that I think is fundamental is that life isn't neutral. If we are, or if we don't exist, it's not the same thing. If the person to whom we share our compassion exists or doesn't exist, it's not the same thing. Because compassion is a dialogue, it's an exchange. It doesn't leave us indifferent. And if I'm there to see my friend Mira or to be the father of Giorgio Maria, it's not an accident. It's because I'm put in the conditions to be able to do this, to be able to. And I think we need to recognize that each of us needs to do well where you're placed, because if you're there or if you're not there, it's not the same thing. So we need to rediscover this importance that each of us has, and which many others put in a second place, because this protagonism and this world which isn't particularly appreciated, because Catholics aren't supposed to say it, this leadership that can be exercised in a particularly good way, and it's something that has to deal with the fullness of a life, and not so much with Anglo-Saxon words or mentalities, Anglo-Saxon mentalities about money. Thank you very much. So let's conclude our encounter, thanking our guests who've helped us reflect a lot on a question of what's essential. And so essential, the essence, having trust, having a gaze is essential, having a relationship is essential. I think all these things can help us in the days of the meeting, accompany us, and they need to recall us that we are the meeting, that the meeting is an experience that needs our presence. Yeah. And so you'll find various ways to sustain the meeting, even also from the economic point of view, because this is needed as well. We don't just need mental health. We're called that the state prepares, or it's not just we citizens can construct, but this is a place that needs to be constructed, and so that lets us to live, to reason, and to smile and laugh even. Good evening to everybody. Thank you.
dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia? Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite